So we had to build a $12 million plant suddenly. We didn't have enough money. So Anurag went back to Arunas and said, I need about 6-7 million more. And then we did another round with the friends and family of Arunas and so on. And boom, that plant succeeded. And now Chevron wants our plant, Exxon wants our plant. I don't even have a single sales guy in the company. At that point, we are a year and a half in. And I call up my buddy from undergrad. He comes over, he becomes our head of sales, BD at that point. And then he signs Chevron up, Exxon up, and we suddenly have 12 plants we have to deliver for just Chevron. And I am practically spending most of my time in Midland, Texas instead of Boston. And just things go crazy.
Welcome to The Meter, the podcast that digs into the origin stories of the founders, inventors, and entrepreneurs creating exciting innovations in a less exciting but very necessary field, the utilities. We go deep into the trials, risks, and successes that these folks experience, all to make our basic necessities run better, whether that's your tap water, electrifying your home, or bringing internet to your phone. I'm your host, Andrew Dugan. According to UNESCO, agriculture uses about 70% of all freshwater withdrawals. A far second is industrial use at about 20%. And then domestic use, like drinking water, showers, cooking, comes in at about 12%. So this means that those food processing facilities, chemical plants, and oil refineries that you see off the highway use about twice as much water than every household in the world combined. So as we face water scarcity in the midst of an industrial economy that just keeps growing, figuring out how to reduce water use at industrial facilities is a crucial part of making sure everyone gets enough. For Prakash Govindan and his team at Gradiant, it's been the mission for 15 years, and they'll boast on their website that they have helped save 6.5 billion liters of freshwater withdrawals, 8.5 billion liters of wastewater recycled under their guidance, 1,500 megawatts saved, and 950 metric tons of carbon emissions avoided thanks to Gradiant. But like anything else, there were humble beginnings. After graduating from the prestigious Indian Institute of Technology with his master's in mechanical engineering, Prakash was accepted to a PhD program at MIT in the United States. But his dad advised him to get some real-world experience before moving to Cambridge, and he landed a job at GE in their energy innovation department, where he seemed to just catch a bug for invention. In his 16 months at GE, he got his name on 10 different patents. And GE compensated their employees about $400 per patent, which is the money he then used to go leave India and start his PhD program in Boston. It was there where he immediately met his co-founder, Anurag, but their path to starting Gradiant took a little more time.
On the good advice of my dad, I decided to hold the application for a year and work for a year at least. And I got placed into GE through the campus interviews, through IIT. And I worked not in the US, actually. I worked in Bangalore out of the John F. Wells Technology Center. But my boss was in the US. And I was very fortunate, they gave me a very nice problem to solve. GE has these beautiful gas turbines which work for normal fuel, but they had a project in China where we were getting low BTU fuel, low calorific value fuel. How do you make the same gas turbine work for that? So I came up with a series of ideas. I'm at heart an inventor, and I wrote about 10 patents on different ideas. And this was in the first several months at GE. So I gained notoriety, as I always do everywhere, in the first several months. And then I left the R&D team. It left the new products team, and it went to other teams which build it, execute it, put it in the field. And I never heard about it. And surprisingly, when I was later on finishing my PhD at MIT, my boss at GE, who had become a very good friend of mine, called me and said, Prakash, I'm sending you some photos on WhatsApp. Have a look. And these were photos of the ideas that I had invented at GE. which was implemented 4 years, 5 years later. So that's the one part of working for GE that I couldn't digest, is that I cannot see through my invention. See, for an inventor, it's like a baby. An invention is like a baby. No mother or father likes to give up the baby, right? You want to see it grow and become an adult, develop a personality, which I'm going through with my two daughters now. It's just a wonderful journey. Similarly, for an invention. So when I got to MIT, I had this conviction, and somehow or the other, I got into MIT. I still believe it was clerical error, because just going there and seeing the IQ and the general brilliance of people around me, like Anurag, who has at least 30 IQ points on me. Don't tell him I told you. You hold it over me. But and he also has 20 hair points on me also. But so we I had this conviction when I got to MIT that my career will be about invention, innovation, and I will see it through. Might be, you can say it was blind conviction, but it was still that something I carried. Importantly, at GE they give you a patent bonus. If you're an Indian employee, they give you $400 per patent. So the 10 patents gave me $4,000, which was the base funds to get to MIT in the first place. Then I got funding from Professor Leonhard. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant professor, and a very, very compassionate, kind person. At that time, he didn't have any PhD students. He had gone through tenure track, been super successful, went into admin side, and then was restarting research. And we got a big grant from KFUPM MIT Research Center at MIT, $50 million overall. And we wanted to work on something really groundbreaking. So he asked me to look at different ways to concentrate saline brines and desalinate them, which would be effective for higher salinities. So I looked at various things, and I concluded that mimicking nature's cycle was a good idea. And I started doing that. And one thing led to the other. Suddenly, I'm finishing my PhD. I have 40 patents and I need a job. So that's where Gradient began.
So you meet your co-founder Anurag in Boston or Cambridge in your lab. Is that correct? You guys were lab partners or in the same department?
No, same lab. So the iconic 77 Massachusetts Avenue, the big entrance of MIT, right at that basement was our lab, right at the entrance basement. And when you get to MIT as an international student, they assign a buddy for you who has been to MIT the year before from the same country. And that was Anurag. Even though he's a year younger to me, he got there for his master's. So he got there a year before me. And then this guy comes and meets me, takes me to the Muddy Charles, which is the one MIT pub. I don't drink at all. He has his beer, I have my water. And we have a great conversation. I don't see him for 1.5 years after that, because he did his master's jointly with other labs, and he was only briefly in and out of the Rosenau Kendall heat transfer lab at MIT. But then he started his PhD in that lab, and I had just finished my qualifying exams, and we hit it off. Every day we would discuss about something or the other water, and we have the relationship has gone strength from strength. He's like my brother now. When I go to Boston, I don't book a hotel room. I just go live stay in his guest bedroom. And the same here. He comes to Abu Dhabi, he stays here, and we have had the time of our lives. Both of us are similar in one way, that we love uncertainty, but we are so different in terms of personalities. I am tall and bald. He's short and has a lot of hair and looks super young. We have very different interests. I had any spare time, I would be reading. He'd probably be online researching some random stuff. So it's been a fun ride. He had this entrepreneurial drive. While I was an inventor and I wanted to come up with things that can help society at large, make an impact from what I know. He had this drive to start a company. So Gradient is really his entrepreneurial spark more than mine. And he kept asking me, man, we should start a company. I was like, dude, my girlfriend in India is waiting. I have to go get married. Shut up. I have to take a job. And then eventually he broke me down. And also, it's just natural for me to be part of a new venture. I have natural entrepreneurial tendencies. So I gave in. We couldn't come up with a name. We debated for days, and finally I figured out that my PhD thesis is full of gradients, temperature gradients, concentration gradients, cross gradients of temperature and concentration. And when you write a cross gradient of concentration and temperature, it is delta N for concentration, T for temperature. So I rewrote gradient, which is Gradient as Gradi delta NT. The most nerdiest name for a company in water history. And boom, we had a name. We then went from strength to strength somehow.
That explains the logo, which I think is a delta, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, okay. So that's so funny that your co-founder is just the guy who was assigned to you when you came to MIT, and here you are, you're still brothers, just fully now running this company together 20 years later. And so you came up with the name. Did you have an idea of what it was going to be? Did you know it was going to be something related to water and industrial water, to be specific? And so you guys started, and I'm not sure how this happened. You could probably tell me. You were gifted an angel investment from an MIT alum who had been successful as an entrepreneur. How did the alumnus find you?
See, where we went was naturally, of course, of what we worked on. So we debated for just 5 minutes, I would say, what would be the technology we bring to market. And it was obvious to both Anurag and me, it would be stuff I developed. Because while he is a better entrepreneur, I'm a better inventor. That became the focus. So the last 6 months of my PhD, I spent treating different wastewaters, and then I focused on produced water treatment in the lab with the pilot I had built, with the technology I had developed. So that was definitely what we were going to do. See, in the 13 years that ensued, we have had a lot of ideas on what Gradient will become. Many of them completely not what it became, but we are flexible enough to pivot and go where it is right to go rather than be fixed in our ideas. Before day one, we had to raise money because a hardware play like this is difficult. It needs capital upfront. So we had opportunities to go into incubators. We had opportunities to take money from venture capitalists. Anurag did a great job at mapping out everyone in that Boston ecosystem and MIT ecosystem who was funding companies like this. And we met every one of them. But then we met Arunas Chesanas. You have to meet him sometime, Andrew. Genial guy, extremely funny, very just you can learn a lot. I have learned a lot about life from this guy. Just happy-go-lucky, successful entrepreneur who sold his company in telecom space for a couple of $1 billion. And he had some money. And he came to see us with his wife and he said, okay, you guys look like good people. I have no idea what you're doing. You're MIT PhDs. Anurag gave me a business plan. Sounds great. But I'm sure it will not work out like that. It'll be different. And his wife, Pam, told us, do something good. He is giving you money. Do something that is helpful for society. And I expressed there that is how we are brought up, and that is our goal in life, not to make money, but rather to make a positive impact on society. And they loved it. They wrote us a check for $500,000. And Arunas, being Arunas, found another $500,000 to come with it. Some other people. So boom, we had 1 million. And then we went and got another million on the back of that. We had a couple of $1 million. I had gotten a pilot agreement, a contingent agreement, which the customer had agreed to let us pilot at scale at their site with the technology I had. And if that succeeded in metrics KPI A, B, and C, automatically we got a build, own, operate contract for the larger scale, which was $12 million. And then I hired our undergraduate students who were working with us in our PhD, Stephen and Max, who are still with Gradient. Brilliant. Stephen now heads global R&D for us. Max heads global intellectual property for us. Since we have more than 300 patents, it's an important function. And boom, between all of us, we designed the pilot. The MIT guys are good at engineering. This one thing we have a claim to. So we engineered it ourselves, found vendors, built it. It succeeded. In the interim, we hired our head of engineering, Mark Zaladak, who was phenomenal for us for years, and went from strength to strength. And that succeeded. So we had to build a $12 million plant suddenly. We didn't have enough money. So Anurag went back to Arunas and said, I need about 6-7 million more. And then we did another round with the friends and family of Arunas and so on. And boom, that plant succeeded. And now Chevron wants our plant, Exxon wants our plant. I don't even have a single sales guy in the company. At that point, we are a year and a half in, and I call up my buddy from undergrad, Karthik Madhav, and I say, dude, you have to come to Gradient, man. He comes over, he becomes our head of sales, BD at that point, and then he signs Chevron up, Exxon up, and we suddenly have 12 plants we have to deliver for just Chevron. And I am practically spending most of my time in Midland, Texas instead of Boston. And things go crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy how fast the success happened for you guys.
Yeah.
You defend your PhD, you start this company, and like you're saying, in oil and gas, when it's hot, and you guys caught a really big wave. Tell me more. So you're helping them with cleaning their produced water from oil and gas production. They need to reuse this water, perhaps, for their process facility, Midland. I'm a Texan myself, and so I know it can be very dry out on the west side of the state, probably in the Permian Basin, doing this. So by 2014, a year in, you already win the Industrial Project of the Year from the Global Water Awards. You personally won the Water Technology Idol of the Year. But I mean, within a year of starting this company, you guys are working with millions of dollars. You're winning awards. I mean, it's really fast, the success.
Absolutely crazy, right? So 2011, I attend my first IDA and they give me the Best Paper Presentation Award. That's the first award I have ever won in my life. I'm not the sporty guy, never won any sporting awards in school or never came top of class. First award I win is the IDA award in Perth. And then 2013, Tom Pankratz, who I met at the IDA in 2011 when I was still a PhD student, calls me up and says, hey, you guys just started Gradient. I want you to come and present at this thing called Tech Idol I run at GWI. And it is in Sevilla. Sevilla is nice. And I had just gotten married in 2012 and was due a honeymoon. So I tell my wife, can we go to Sevilla for honeymoon? We end up for honeymoon in Sevilla and we have the time of our life. And I take just 2 hours off to attend this Tech Idol and I make my presentation, which is basically our pitch deck we had refined to the investors with the technology from my PhD. And GWI loves it. They do audience voting. There are 6 contenders and I get 50% of the voters, some insane number. And I won Tech Idol suddenly. And then that helped us with the investors and stuff. And when we built the pilot and the large scale plant, I called Tom again and said, hey, that you guys have the Global Water Awards. Can I apply? He said, anybody can apply. Go ahead and apply. I applied for Industrial Project, Water Project of the Year. We won that the year after in 2014. And we have revenue coming in by 2016. The energy business, the oil and gas business was doing almost $25 million in recurring revenue. And the crazy part is, Andrew, we are idiots, right? We decide to do build, own, operate. We don't sell equipment. So we own and operate. At that point, we are operating 20 plants for different large oil clients that we invented.
It's a lot of risk.
We built, and it was all from equity money. See,
Right.
We didn't have the ability to raise debt. We didn't have the balance sheet to raise debt. And these were not on back of ironclad take or play contracts. This was on back of POs, right? This is how oil and gas works. So we did that and it was going great. And then oil price, I'm not an economist. Nobody told me commodities can trade for negative value. Oil price dropped so precipitously. You can look this up. In 2016, at one point, it was negative dollars per barrel. People were paying money to take the oil away. So needless to say, the whole thing died. Every one of our contracts died. Anurag and I were looking at each other. And we had built a nice team at this point, 60 people already at that point. Great people. 90% of them, more than that, are still at Gradient. And we're doing great. Then this happened. And Anurag looked at me and said, man, those people in Shanghai Electric Company, they wanted to talk to us. maybe we can go to China and see and we can get a project. So we went to China, and Shanghai Electric Company partnered with us. We got a project in flue gas desulfurization wastewater. You won't believe it. I went every month to China for 2.5 years from Boston, and was driving me nuts, driving my wife nuts, who's, God bless her soul, she's a very patient person. So and in addition to going to China, my background is South India, right? So I went to South India, I got a textile project parallelly, and we had zero employees in Asia at that time. So I designed and built with the 60 people I have in the US profitably water treatment plants for China and India, which is the opposite of what people do normally. People have engineers there and they build for the US. This is the craziness of Gradient. And those were successful, and our revenue started to build up again. But it was nothing like the fast buildup of oil and gas. So it took us a few years, and I was traveling too much to that part of the world. And we had a family member who was unwell, and my wife's one of my wife's parents, and she was going back and forth to India because it was very serious illness. And at that time when our focus was in Asia, Singapore government met us in 2017 GWI, where we also won some award or the other, and they said, hey, if you guys move your R&D and you set up a regional headquarters in Singapore, we'll give you $5 million. I said, wow, I want to move to Asia anyway. So I took my R&D team, Stephen La, Max, all of them who had come with me from MIT, but also we had expanded the team. All of them moved to Singapore with me, about 12, 13 people. The engineering team, the core of it remained in US, and some of the oil and gas people we had to let go because we didn't have oil and gas business. And boom, I'm in Singapore at the beginning of 2018, and this grant from the government is golden. I'm telling you, I encourage all these new water companies who I advise from time to time to work with governments like these. What Singapore government did was it put me in touch with exactly the customers in the country who need my solutions. And I sold, as soon as I got there, I worked on it, and I sold a pharmaceutical plant, a semiconductor plant, and stuff for the chemical industry and so on. And the business started booming again. And then we had organically set up in China and India, right? So we hired managing directors for those regions, CEOs for those regions, and traveling there with them. Anurag stayed back in the US because we needed a US headquarters to raise money, and eventually US is today the uh, highest revenue for us is still US. So he stayed back, and I built Asia from one person in 2018 to 300 people by the time of the pandemic, with tens of millions of dollars in revenue. And then pandemic hit. This is oil and gas slum 2.0 happened.
No, that answers it because you wasted no time. I was curious because once that oil and gas slump happened in 2016, around then, because now you're so much more diversified. But I assumed that there was a bit of maybe a come to Jesus moment, if you will, of like, we need to be in other industries. And not just that, but I mean, you go straight to China, straight to Shanghai, start working, with it sounds like an energy utility, and then you're in Singapore, and you're right, Singapore is a world leader in water, and the way they're set up is so efficient with how they bring industry and solutions together. I don't know if there's anywhere in the world who does it quite like them. And so, how is your role changing over time? I mean, you start this company, which is you and your friend from MIT. How are you managing coming from being a founder to now being the boss? What is this like stepping up into these new roles and managing people from
I never thought of it as changing roles. For me, always it is where can I be useful? And sometimes I even take stuff on which is not natural to me or I'm an expert in. And I will try to do my best. I'll try to learn. I was officially CTO from day one, but I did do a lot of the operation stuff. And when it happened that we were 300, 350 people around the pandemic, and a lot of them directly or indirectly reporting to me. Anurag said, "Man, your title is wrong. You should be COO." I said, "Fine." do whatever you want. You can call me chief janitor if you want. I don't care. So I became COO at that time, and definitely role changed because I'm a core technical guy who looks at the heat and mass balance, the builds the PNID, the process and instrumentation diagram, talks to vendors, designs the unit operations, that kind of stuff. But I almost do zero of that today. And I have done zero of that for like 6 years. So somehow or the other, I would say out of MIT, I was still very much on the spectrum of introvert to extrovert. I want on the end of an introvert, but somehow I changed also. And I now the thing I most enjoy is identifying and bringing in and developing people who are high value for Gradient, who we enjoy working with. I often brag to my team I can hire anyone in the water industry into Gradient. Obviously, not anyone, but most people who have right state of mind will come. So I like working with people. That's what my role has become. I'm also very strategic. So Anurag leads raising of the money from the beginning till today, but a lot of the strategic aspect. For example, we started acquiring companies when the pandemic hit and things sort of plateaued because you will be surprised to know the reason. I was trying to enter Malaysia from Singapore, and not being a local company was a big roadblock. I had to work with these suboptimal local partners who were trying to constantly take my margin away and screw us over. So I said, let's buy one of these companies. They're all small companies. We can afford it. And Shankar Natarajan, who had come on board in 2018 with us, who's now our global head of sales, phenomenal guy, ex Siemens, ex Babag. He said, I know one of these founders. His name is Swami. He has this company called Sigma Water. He sold his Canadian Sigma Water to H2O Innovation. So I called up my friends at H2O and asked, and they said he's a good guy. So and then I ended up buying that Malaysian company. And then that worked out really well for us. They didn't have any differentiated technology. They didn't have the balance sheet. By then, Gradient was building a balance sheet. It had raised quite a bit of money, and we had the differentiated technology. So we gave all of that to them and encouraged them to go big. And we gave them Shankar and Shiva and Steven, the core Gradient guys, and they went and won a big Melaka refinery project and several other projects, food and beverage in Coca-Cola and AB InBev and all these customers. And that within 2 to 3 years of buying that company, it went from 500,000 in EBITDA to 7-8 million in EBITDA all of a sudden. It just took off. So then I thought I should do more of this. And I went and bought a few more companies. Always small companies which are not differentiated. If you look at Gradient's today's revenue, all those companies when we bought, if you take all that revenue and calculate the percentage, fraction of a percent only it is of the Gradient total revenue. So never a Suez, GE, Veolia like situation, always sort of tuck in kind of M&A. So strategic things like that I learned. I have no background in M&A or any.
But you learned it naturally. Not only have you done acquisitions, but you've also spun out some companies out of Gradient, like specifically Turing, which is an AI focused. And I'm not totally sure whether it's under the umbrella. It seems to be its own entity, but tell me more about Turing. I mean, we all know that AI it really captured the world over the last 3.5 years. And, does it come from that AI boom? Were you all looking into AI before, ChatGPT-4? Tell me more about Turing and how it came from Gradient.
Let me give you some background before that. So while we were building the business, we built a technology stack also. While we started with the carrier gas extraction technology from my PhD, when we even got to the oil field, it became apparent we need a pre-treatment, we need a crystallizer. So we developed expertise, but we also invented other stuff. We invented a membrane process to concentrate. This RO has never been able to do, to go to 20% salinity. We were the first to develop an OARO, CFRO. In fact, if you look at OARO as a technology today, most of the installations are gradients. We have done 95% of all the installations, OARO installations in the world is gradients. We were the first ones to work on that and develop the membrane, develop the process, and other stuff, biological methods. We are experts in PFAS. So the core of Gradient is that R&D, and I've always been the R&D head until the last couple of years when Steven and Shiva have completely taken over from me because they're so much better than I am at this point, but we always have that. And sometimes it so happens that some of those technologies don't fit into Gradient because of one reason or the other. And the prime example of that is the machine learning algorithms we developed to optimize performance and chemical usage of our own plants that we were deploying, which was a super hit with our customers. Loved it because their standard performance, just by looking at the data, time series analytics, neural networks, machine learning, and even we were getting into deep learning, we were able to, just looking at the data, we were able to cut, without the thermodynamics or the physics, we were able to cut energy consumption in some cases by 20%. In some cases, chemical consumption by 30%. And the customers loved it and they wanted to pay for it. But the way they wanted to pay for it, it was tens of thousands of dollars in revenue, whereas Gradient sold tens of millions and hundreds of millions worth equipment. So my sales guys were not incentivized to sell it. It just was not a fit for Gradient. And Gradient addresses this important industrial market. But what became Turing had the opportunity in Anurag and my view to address the entire municipal market. And Gradient has competitors in the industrial market like Veolia and Suez and so on, who wouldn't have used Turing because we are competitors even for municipal, right? Even though we are not in municipal. So we separated it. And the guy who came up with the idea in Gradient, the former CTO from Osmoflow, brilliant guy, Hipley, from Australia. He had moved to Singapore for me. He still lives there for me. We made him CEO because this was about product development and deployment, right? So a technical person is the best head for a company like that. And we raised $12 million into it, 12 or $13 million into it. And Turing has become his own thing. Turing services Gradient, Turing services Veolia, Suez, so many other companies. And they have 14 trillion data points in terms of water treatment plants. This is the most powerful AI in water today. 14 trillion data points, which is training their algorithms and so on. And they have now gone agentic. It's still difficult to make huge amount of profits from an applied AI company like that, as is even true for the LLMs, right? Like OpenAI and so on are still making huge losses. But we are getting there with Turing, so it's separate company for that reason. It already needed a separate team. See, the DevOps guys and the AI programmers were costing me an arm and a leg, 2 or 3 times of what we would pay a chemical engineer. So having both in the company was an imbalance also. So we spun it out for those reasons. We have also spun out Alkali because it's a mining company focused on lithium and critical minerals using Gradient technology. And we have this Forever Gone, which is the PFAS solution, which so far fits well into Gradient, but we have always the opportunity to spin that out also.
That's really interesting. I think, that speaks to understanding like the identity of a company and seeing that certain things just aren't fits and being able to say, we have to separate this out instead of trying to make it work and having that impact, the culture and the structure of the company. And so that's really smart.
So
Coming into the
for better or worse, Andrew, Anurag and I are very decisive. Sometimes we make decisive wrong decisions, but we are always decisive right decisions. If something doesn't work, we will shut it down. I have shut down more R&D projects than I have brought to market because that's what it takes to come out with stuff which all see people think everything out of Gradient seems to succeed. It's not so. It's a lot of things we kill so you don't see that it fails.
I think that's just part of R&D, right? You have to crack some eggs to make an omelet. You have to, try a few different things. So when something's not going to work, being able to say shut it down and move on is an important part of taking that R&D and actually making it commercializable, right? And continuing to be profitable is that decisiveness. And so that probably ultimately is for the best. Going into, the present, Fast Company
Uh,
named you guys.
One more thing on the decisiveness, Andrew. Sorry,
Sure.
it's
Yeah.
not just on R&D, but also the business aspect, right? If something doesn't work, we'll stop. For example, in India, we did a lot. We just went everywhere initially, but then we decided it's locking up too much cash in bank guarantees and so on, and the margins are lower than elsewhere in the world. So let's focus on the segments in India which is high value, and we are now market leader in semiconductor, solar, photovoltaic manufacturing, and so on. And hence our margins in India are higher than other countries, and we hardly have any cash lockup. So we are decisive on the business side also. We kill things and we pivot. Yeah, we drive some people crazy.
And I think a lot of people struggle with that with like entrepreneurship, right? Especially when there's money on the table, you want to be everywhere and you don't want to lose any opportunities, but ultimately it's better to forego certain opportunities and focus on where you're going to succeed most, or like you're saying, make the most margin and let some things slide. And it's ultimately for the best.
Focus is overrated, I would say. Too many venture capitalists say you should focus on one thing, one this thing when you begin. We did on oil and gas for a while. Then we went wide, but we are disciplined enough to look at the P&L and look at where it is going, and prune or expand based on that. Ultimately, our laser focus is making sure Gradient gets to a scale where the impact is as big as it can be, not on any specific technology or business. We're not attached to any of these.
So coming to now, you guys opened new offices in Phoenix and Syracuse. Fast Company named you guys one of the most innovative companies of 2025. You recently closed a Series E round, which valued Gradient at $2 billion, which is an incredible accomplishment. And, you've mentioned this. Everyone, or a lot of people from the original team from the beginning, are still at Gradient, and so I guess congratulations. One, it's just incredible what you guys have built. But I'm curious. So you recently stepped in as CEO the last couple of months. Was it in April that you stepped up from
April,
COO to CEO?
yes,
You
April we
guys have any?
announced. April we announced. Anurag called me December 27, 2025 and said, man, it's time for a change. I have been at the helm for so long. Why don't you take this and just boost it to the next level? I'll be with you throughout. I'll become executive chairman. I'll continue to raise money, do my thing. But this thing needs an operational head. And then we took 3-4 months to digest what that means, what the org chart will look like, make sure we bring our team on board with it, and so on. For me, it's the same. For me, truly, yes, the title is different, but it doesn't make any difference whatsoever. There are some aspects where there is increased focus for me, but it's the same as before, more or less for me. Yeah, I mean, sky is the limit. We feel with this, like you said, we got $1 billion valuation with our Series D in 2023, and we got a $2 billion valuation in 2026, in 2.5 years after Series D and Series E. And that makes us the most valuable startup in the history of the water industry. Whoa. There is an aspect of luck in all this also, Andrew. We can't act like we and our effort and our intellectual capital and our teams and their effort is the only factor in this. There is an aspect of luck, being at the right place at the right time, and the universe aligning itself and so on. So we are grateful and we look forward to making this even bigger, more impactful, but without losing that nimble entrepreneurial startup core. See, in GWI this year, they put me on the panel in the first thing, which has never happened before. We must be getting important finally. And they asked me where how to get out of being a startup. I said, why you guys hate being a startup? I would love to be a startup when I'm $100 billion in valuation or revenue. And it surprised a lot of people there. The Apple had the startup culture till quite recently. And they're one of the biggest companies in the world. Being a startup means you're laser focused on customer needs. Being a startup means you're nimble as opposed to bureaucratic or overly process driven. Being a startup means you are lean. So if you don't have resources, you just figure out a way to get something done, which is what I want us to be, however big we are.
I'm glad you said that because I was going to say at a $2 billion valuation, it's almost funny to call you a startup, but it sounds like you enjoy the culture and you enjoy the structure and operations that a startup has, and you don't want to lose how a startup functions no matter how big you get, because you like how it operates and you like the nimbleness, to your point. I'm curious, to wrap it up. So you're taking the reins as CEO, even if it doesn't feel like that's any different. You know, do you have new markets, new products, new locations? You know, what is next for Gradient as you go into the future, into 2027 and beyond?
See, without continuously focusing on it or planning for it, we at Gradient have built an important part of the water layer of the AI economy at this point. What does that mean? You know, Jensen Huang explains the AI economy as 5 layers of a cake. So there is chips, there is data centers, there is power, there is applied stuff, and there are models. We operate in all of those layers. Our largest business is chips. Our fastest growing business is data centers. We work for the who's who of both of these layers. All the hyperscalers for data centers and all the big chip manufacturers of the world. We work for almost all the big chip manufacturers of the world. We work. Then we have always been in energy. Whether it's renewable energy, we are market leader in solar photovoltaic cell manufacturing. We work in oil and gas. We work in green hydrogen. We have our protein source product for that. So Gradient, the operating company which is making 100 million in EBITDA, is become the water layer of the AI economy. Then there is the nebulant part of Gradient. Google had Google X. So you could, we don't call it that big. You could think of it as Gradient X, which has all this new stuff coming. PFAS, we have done a dozen large scale pilots around the world. People absolutely love how we separate and completely destroy the carbon fluoride bond of PFAS. Huge problem around the world. Regulation has to catch up, but it will. And when that does, we will go. Alkali for lithium and critical minerals. From oil and gas wastewater, we are right now producing battery grade lithium carbonate in Pennsylvania. We are the first company to ever do that, not just in the US, around the world. We have this results coming out of the R&D project with PUB in Singapore for low energy desal. We have the lowest energy desal possible. We just wrote the patents. We'll announce. We announced at Singapore International Water Week last week the results of the same, and more. We are working on hydrogen generators, as in the electrochemical cell, not the water treatment part of it. So we have several irons in the fire with respect to technology. In terms of geographic reach, for a company which is not 50 billion in size, which is only a couple of billion in size, we already are in most of the major water markets. There are a couple more venues we will target in the next few years to complete the set. But geographic expansion is not much scope is left for Gradient at this point. It's more focusing on the geographies we are in. See, US plus Europe is about 2/3 of our business. And then between India and Middle East is another quarter of our business, and the rest is APAC and stuff. So we're pretty neatly placed, and growth is in all these places. I mean, sky is the limit, especially with our R&D engine that we have. We can solve problems from scratch that the big companies can only dream of solving.
That's awesome. No, that's all really exciting. Thank you for coming on and giving me the story of Gradient. It's incredible what you guys have done so far, and I think you're gonna continue to do big things and get to 4 billion and 10 billion, and it sounds like that's, yeah, the sky's the limit, as you said.
Actually, for the external world, we say 2 billion valuation, whatever. But the way I don't measure success like that. For me, Gradient impacts this success. I measure it in equivalent of households in water consumption, how much we save in water by our recycling plants, by our treatment plants, and so on. So we currently save the equivalent of 50 million households. This is like a lot of households, and I want that to become a billion households in 10 years. So that's how I would measure impact. The dollars, sure. AI economy has thrown up several trillion-dollar companies, a handful at least. But at the end of the day, the most important resource that we have as the human race is water. One of my friends became a professor of astronomy, and he looks for exoplanets. And he tells me when he looks for exoplanets, what he looks for is a signature of water, not oxygen, because it's that critical to human life and life in general. So maybe there will never come a day when a water company is valued at $1 trillion, but our impact should be is at that level. And the current incumbents just don't do it service. I got up at 2 a.m. to do a customer call today with the US time zone, and I am able to do that on a regular basis because in my bones I feel that is true, that Gradient needs to be that company.